Hi, my name is Ted Snowden. I'm the program director for the Roots and Wings program, which is coordinated by Angelic Organics Learning Center. Today I'll be talking about preparing for a spring garden, and I'll be doing this in collaboration with Yatte Moore. He is our urban farm manager, and he'll pick up midway through the presentation, and then he'll conclude it at the very end. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about, as you're starting to think about preparing a garden for spring, you need to assess what space you're going to be planting in. A couple of things you want to take in consideration is that at least you have 8 to 10 hours of sunlight that your garden will be exposed to. Sun is critical to being able to get your garden off to a good start and being able to maintain it throughout the season. A couple other things you want to look at, the area that you're going to be planting in. You want to make sure that it's level. The last thing that you want to be doing is watering your garden, and then you have some erosion that's going to take place, or the water won't remain in the respective bed that you want it. A couple of other things you want to take in consideration is how you're going to work that respective space. Typically you want your beds to be about 4 feet wide, and what's nice about that is that you can work that bed from left to right and to be able to sustain that entire bed. It can be as long as you want it, but it's really going to be critical that it's at least 4 feet wide, so you'll be able to continue to maintain that garden throughout the season. A couple other things that you want to take in consideration is if you want to plant directly in the ground versus doing a raised bed. There's some advantages in terms of doing a raised bed. It'll allow you to be able to control the soil conditions that you put organic matter in relative to what you might find in the soil. So that's going to be a critical piece as well. And then last but not least, I think it's going to be important that you take in consideration, do you have access to water? That's going to be critical. And the reason why that's so important, you don't want that to become a burden for you, whether you need to hand water your respective garden or if you need to pull out water hose to be able to do that as well. You want to make it as convenient for you as possible. So water is an important element as well. The next step, you want to start looking at your soil conditions. And a couple of things you want to look for. Is your soil compacted? In many instances, what compaction comes from is when soil has been stepped on and it's not loose, it's not fertile. A couple other things you want to look for, if you have clay in your soil, and that's usually pretty evident as well. You look at your soil and you'll see something that almost looks like a greenish brown color, and it's distinctively different from your topsoil. And usually you can tell if it has clay in the soil is if you can make ribbons with it. You can press it between your fingers and you can see that there's clay content there because it'll stick together. Another thing that you want to look for is if you have sandy soil. That's not a good condition to grow in as well. Everybody knows what sand is. It's going to be very granular, so you need to make sure that you're sensitive about if you have sandy soil. And the last thing is if you have rocky soil, and that's evident as well. Once you start digging into that soil and you see rocks and stuff down there, you don't want that in your beds. With the rocks in those beds, one of the challenges you're going to have is because many of the vegetables that you're going to be growing, it's going to have a deep root system. And you don't want it to have any kind of tension there where it can't necessarily root deeply into your bed. So those are just a couple of things you want to look for. Now you've determined where you're going to plant your garden. Now the next thing, you want to look at the condition of your soil. You're evaluating if you have access to water. And then the next thing you want to do is decide, what vegetables do I grow? And that's where the fun part starts to come in. I always caution folks who are starting a garden for the first time is that you do it with some caution. You don't want to become overburdened with what's out there in terms of what you can grow. The reason being is because there's so many different fruits and vegetables out there that you can grow. And I always say, grow what you think you like. That's the first step. If you like kale, look at the different varieties of kale that you might want to grow, and start there. And then just based on the amount of space that you have for those respective vegetables that you want to grow, then you can specifically start planting out other vegetables you'd like to incorporate into your garden. The next thing I think is important is that when you look at vegetables that you want to grow, take in consideration not only growing vegetables, but maybe take in consideration growing herbs, maybe growing fruit. A really simple fruit to grow is strawberries. They're low-growing fruit, they're kind of viney, and to be able to taste and appreciate a homegrown strawberry relative to what you buy at the store, it's distinctly different. And speaking of different, that's another thing that I want you to take in consideration. Give you an example. I talked about maybe considering growing herbs. I don't know if you've ever went to a store and you see those little cellophane packs of herbs, and they're about so big and so wide, and you get maybe 3 or 4 twigs in that respective pack. They usually cost anywhere from $2.99 to $3.99. With herbs, most of the herbs that you can grow from seeds, they're perennials, and what that means is that they will come back year after year. And a lot of times you will cut those herbs back and you use them throughout the year. It more than pays for itself if you grow a herb. So not only will you have it for the duration of the season, but it will come back next year for you. So you would never have to go back to the store and buy any more herbs. Another thing that I would suggest to you, look at the cost relative to growing that item. And I'll give you an example. In my garden, we love to grow snap peas. If you go to the store, snap peas run anywhere from $2.99 to $3.99 a pound. But you can grow snap peas. You buy a pack of snap peas, and you get hundreds of seeds in that pack. And you can grow as much as you want. So it more than pays for itself. So those are a couple of different things that you should take in consideration when you're talking about making a determination what items you want to grow in your garden. And then the fifth thing that I want to encourage you to do, when you start shopping for seeds, I would suggest that the first and foremost that you consider looking at a catalog. There's tons of different seed catalogs out there, and in those seed catalogs, it gives you a wealth of information, and those catalogs are free. You can just request a catalog, it'll come in the mail, and they'll go from A to Z, from asparagus to zucchini, and they'll tell you everything you need to know about how to grow that respective vegetable. If you decide you don't want to start from seed, you can also purchase seedlings, which we'll be talking a little bit about in the second part of the presentation, where you can go to the store and you can purchase seeds that have already been started for you. But what I like about starting my own seeds is that first and foremost, by purchasing seeds from a catalog, you get a bigger array of different vegetables you can grow. And also, it allows you to really dig in and appreciate what you're growing, because you can literally see it being grown from seed and as it matures to a finished product. So that's what I like about growing seeds. So with that being said, a couple of things I just wanted to reiterate before we conclude, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Moore, is that when you're looking at those seed catalogs, make sure that you're looking at the specific information relative to when to plant it, how deep you want to plant it, what kind of spacing you need, when's the appropriate time to plant it, and what kind of water requirements. They'll give you all those specific details and more, so when you're making a determination about what to grow and how to grow, it'll all be there right at your fingertips, and then you can make an educated decision. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Yatte Moore. He's going to take you through various steps in terms of starting vegetables from seed, and he'll conclude this presentation as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yatte Moore. I'm the urban farm manager at Roots and Wing, and here we're going to show you the continuation of things you need to do to start up your spring garden. And the first thing that you will have to consider is mapping out your farm. As you see here, I have an illustration of what I do to map out the farm. If you see, I got it broken up into 3 different quadrants. I also got pictures of the open available spaces, and I also got pictures of the storage, basically mapping out everything and making sure that I have enough space that I need to grow the vegetables that I'm trying to grow. The second thing that you will have to consider is the side in between your warm season vegetables and your cool season vegetables. Your cool season vegetables are things like lettuce, collards, mustards, kale, Swiss chard, and your warm season stuff is basically like your potatoes, your tomatoes, your okra, your peas, your zucchinis, and squash. Then once you determine that, you have to look at your zoning, because Here's another illustration of zoning. As you can see, where we're zoning at is probably different from your zoning area. So you will have to see your zoning area so you could beat the frost date. And that's important because if you plant before the frost date, it's going to damage or ruin the plants, so your plants won't come. So you need to plant after that. After that, we will go to what seeds are you trying to grow. For an example, I have got some kale. This is winter boar kale that I grow. And what I like about this is it's hardy. You will grow a lot of it. You will get a lot more bang for your buck with this kale. In the back of this kale are specific informations on how to grow it, when is the best time to grow it, as far as it needs to be direct seeded or seed started, how long is it going to take to germinate, and all the way to its harvest dates. Once you get your seed, the next thing that is important to you is to grab the proper planting soil. As you see here, I got the planting soil, and what I like about this is very light and fluffy. It allows air circulation into the plant, so it'll grow better. Once you water it, it'll hold the water in longer, so it'll grow, and it's a better growing material, so it'll help your plants germinate better. Then once you go from that, you will go to your seed trays. These seed trays comes in different sizes. You got some of the bigger, you got some of them that are smaller. And you would need the seed trays to put your seeds that you're planting to seed start in. Now you could plant different ways. You got your direct seeding, which is you're taking the seed straight from the packet and putting it into the ground. Or in a lot of instances, you will seed start your trays where you put them into these little cell pods and you grow them. And once you grow them, I use this heating mat, and the heating mat is used for germination purposes only. You will use them, and the mat heat, the heat of the mat will heat up the tray to get it to germinate. Once your seeds are germinate, you will take it off of your mat and put it into the shelving next to some light, so it'll get sunlight. It's very important for your plants to get sunlight, because if it don't, then it's not going to grow. As far as the next thing you will have to grab is your watering can and water, because it's very important to water your seeds. Because when seeds are small, especially like I compare baby seeds to like babies, real life babies, and you got to be very attentive to them. You got to water them, make sure you got enough sunlight, and take extra good care of them. But because if this beginning stage of it is very critical, because it's going to determine whether it's going to germinate or not. Okay, after you take care of your watering and make sure that your plant is got enough water, lighting, as you can see here, is very important when it comes down to germinating your seedlings. I have the mat down here to bring heat, and these are grow lights, and these grow lights are particular into growing your seedlings. Even after it germinates and you move it to its separate location, these grow lights is going to help it grow because it simulates sunlight and it reaches for it. And another thing that you should do is to identify your plant that you're growing. We use these big orange ones when we're out into the field. So we would, if you come to our farm, you will see a lot of these, and what you will put on it is the date that you grow it, the vegetable that you're growing, like kale. You'll write down the variety of kale that you're growing, which I was growing winter boar. So I have my date, the vegetable, and the variety of vegetable. And it's very important to keep track of the date that you planted and when it goes in the ground, because that's going to determine when it's going to be ready for harvest. For an example, I have kale that, let's say if I wanted to have it for June 20th, then you would start with June 20th, because that's the day that you would like to have your plants ready. And then you will look at your seed packet to determine when it's going to be ready. This usually takes anywhere from 40 to 45 days. So if I want it for June 20th, I will start from June 20th, and then I will back out 40 to 45 days. And once you get to that date, that's the date that you will have to put the plant in the ground. Now, if you're direct seeding, then you would put it in the ground 45 days after that you really need it. But for most cases, when I seed starting, you would have to give it germination time. And germination time takes anywhere from 7 to 14 days. So if you take that back, let's say you need your plants on June 20th, you will look at your seed packet. This will take anywhere from 40 to 45 days. You would subtract that 40 to 45 days from June 20th. That's going to give you the date that this has to be put in the ground. But if you need to seed start it, you would take back 7 to 14 days from that 45 days to get your seed starting date. I don't mean to try to confuse it, it gets a lot, but that's for those who would like to seed start it. So you would have to give it 1 to 2 weeks of germination. Then once it germinates, that day you will put it from the seed trays into the ground, and then from the day that you put it in the ground, it's going to take anywhere from 40 to 45 days until your seed is ready to be harvested. Next thing that you will have to see is when you're planting is how far apart that you will have to plant. Some plants could be planted closer, some plants needs this space so it'll grow, because if it's too close, it's going to turn into competition, and one plant is going to grow and one plant is going to die. So comes with seeding, you will have to see how far you got to plant it, how deep you got to plant it, and get the right spacing so it'll grow at its proper depth. I also have these seed starting books. If you're needing to know what to use, I use these two books, particularly Johnny's. Johnny's is one of my favorite books because it has a variety of different vegetables that you could grow out of, and a lot of these is organic, so you ain't got to worry about artificial foods coming from these books. And these are great books that I use to help seed start with. And this right here in particular, for the young youth kids, when I be dealing with a lot of kids, it's hard for them to seed start because of how little these seeds are. As you can see, when I pull out this kale, you see how little that the seeds are. I've been farming for years now, so I'm very good at taking 1 to 2 seeds and plant them into the cell thing. That's another thing that is important when seed starting inside the trays, is not to overload the cells with too many seeds. As you can tell, there's only 1 or maybe 1 to 2 plants in a cell. You don't want to go more than 3, because if you go more than 3, then it's going to be in competition with itself. Something's not going to make it, and it's going to die out. So it's important to put 1 to 2 seedlings inside of here. And dealing with the kids, a lot of them, it's hard for them to take it from their hand and plant it, so I use this. You will fill these seeds up inside of here, and then on the dial it has numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that is the number of seeds that are fin to exit out of here to be planted in here. So you could take seeds that it looks very, you can put these seeds inside of here just like this, close it, and then let's say I want 2 seeds, you will put the dial there, and then you would go and it will expunge 2 seeds out into the pod, which is already there, and then you will just cover it over just like that, and then you will grow it. Like I said, it's best for us to keep up with what you're growing. I don't know if you can see it, but I have the date, I have the product, and the variety. It's red Russian kale. I planted it January 22nd, and it's going to take anywhere from 40 to 45 days. After that, then it'll be ready to harvest. after you put the seeds in the trays and it's all germinated, the last thing to do is when the plants is ready to transplant it into the field. Now that could be a little bit difficult because the plants are little. The best way to identify if the plants are ready is looking for its true leaves. In the beginning, plants will just give off a leaf or two, that's its baby leaves, but then once it's ready, it's going to give out its true leaves. So if it's collards, you know what grown collards look like. When it's little, you will start to see it start to take shape and form with its true leaves. Then you will take the transplant, and you got to be very careful not to disturb its rooting system, because if you mess up its rooting system, it may or may not grow, depending on the root system. But you will be careful with the seedlings, and you will transplant it into the farming based on how far you got to spread it apart and how deep and the spacing. There's some instances where when I first started farming, I planted maybe 4 to 5 plants in a single cell. If that happens to happen, you can do a thing called thinning out. Thinning out is taking out, if I have 5 plants in one cell and I'm trying to get my production, I will wing out maybe 2 to 3, leaving 1 or 2 cells that's going to be strong enough to thrive and to be transplanted into the ground, into the soil. In conclusion, so for you to have everything ready for your spring garden, one is to make sure that you map out everything. Make sure you have enough space that you will be able to grow the plants that you want. To determine if you want to direct seed it, to determine whether if you want to seed start it, to separate your warm season crop from your cool season crop. Then the fun part is having the material, making sure that you're having your good potting soil, your good grow lights, your seed trays. Also to have your markers, so you will mark the date and the vegetables and the variety of plants that you're planting. Making sure that you're beating the frost using your zoning. If you having trouble of knowing what to plant, I have seedling books, Johnny's and seed exchangers, making sure that you have your sprinkle can of which you could water your plants with, having mats to heat up the soil. And these are the basic things that you would need to help start and to get your spring garden going. I am Yatte Moore. Thank you for tuning in.
Once again, in conclusion, my name is Ted Snowden, and I'm the program director for the Roots and Wings program. And we're located in Blackhawk Courts, which is a Rockford Housing Authority property. And we're fortunate enough not only to be in partnership with RHA, we also have other partners as well, Zion Lutheran Church, and of course, we couldn't do the work without the support of United Way as well. Just wanted to also extend an invitation for anybody who's interested in ever coming over to the farm. You're always welcome. We're always looking for folks to come over to the farm to volunteer, and we're looking for people to come over to support the work that we're doing. And Yatte, why don't you tell them a little bit about the farm and how it's laid out at Blackhawk Courts?
Oh yeah, the farm is about a half an acre farm. It's broken down into three quadrants. I have a community garden which runs the whole length of the farm. I got this splitting down into the north side and the south side, and we have 2 big hoop houses which we do a lot of our summer vegetable growing inside of there, and as well as fall.
So once again, in conclusion, thank you very much for being attentive, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.